Hi, everyone. Before we start the show today, I just wanted to address something very quickly. We recorded this episode about a day and a half ago, and between then and now when you're watching it, I made the difficult decision to resign from the Commander Advisory Group. So I'm no longer part of the CAG. I'm saying this because you may have heard on social media and other things that I'm not in the CAG anymore, but in this episode, because of the time it was recorded, we're going to speak as if I am. So I wanted to clarify that and make sure there's no confusion. It's not going to change any of my points of view or my opinions or anything like that, so that's all still valid. I just didn't want you to be like, wait, I thought he said he wasn't in it, and now it seems like he is. I am not in the CAG anymore, just to be clear. All right, let's talk about these Commander bans.
Breaking news. It's been about 3 years of no changes from the Rules Committee. The last ban or major rules change was the Golos ban and the Worldfire unban in September of 2021, but that silence was shattered on Monday when they announced 4 brand new bans: Dockside Extortionist, Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and Nadu Winged Wisdom. Predictably, the community had a lot to say about this. Let's check in with Jimmy in the Commander Community Engagement Center.
What's up, everybody? This is Jimmy Kramer coming to you from the MTG Community Center here in the Command Zone, and I am going nuts over here. Okay, let's check in on the community reactions. Right now on Twitter, it looks like everyone's talking about the banned list, but I don't know what they're talking about. There ain't no band in the house because they've all been banned from the band. Okay, what about Facebook? Turns out people still use Facebook. Okay, onwards to Reddit. And what do we expect? It's Reddit, they hate it, that's why we're gonna close this website and never use it again! Okay, maybe on the MTG Commander website, let's refresh, see if they have added any new changes. Have they unbanned anything since banning it? The website is broken, everyone. That is why you should say no, no, no to traditional websites and yes, yes, yes to social media, where I have now lost 2,000 followers! Whoops! You know what? The only thing I gotta say is that this card is no longer going in any of my decks. Because I'm going crazy! Goodbye! I can't even do it! I quit! I don't actually quit. Back to you guys.
Well, it seems as if Jimmy is taking this
as well as can be expected.
Yeah. Okay, we know it's a big deal. A lot of controversy around it. Hopefully you enjoyed the joke. We understand that a lot of people are outraged at the moment on both sides of the fence. Before we get into talking about the bans, let's talk about our sponsors, cardkingdom.com/command. There's a lot of us, myself included, right now that are having to replace a few cards in some of their decks. If you go to Card Kingdom, that's the best place to go to find your Magic products, singles, anything at all. You can find replacements for your Mana Crypts, your Lotuses, your Docksides. Nadu, you probably have to build a whole new deck, but Card Kingdom is good for that as well. They have a big inventory. They got tons of versions of the cards that you want, and they are very convenient because everything arrives on your doorstep in one package all at once. So there's no waiting around for the rest of the cards to show up. If you want to get those decks that are replacing the banned cards back up to speed as fast as possible, Card Kingdom is the best place to go to pick up those singles. Again, cardkingdom.com/command.
And once those cards are in your hand, you're going to need to protect them, keep them safe. Go to ultrapro.com/command to get the highest quality Magic accessories in the business. You can get sleeves and deck boxes, binders, everything that you need to have a collection, keep it safe, keep it organized. Plus, ULTRAPRO has licensing for official Magic art. If you're really into Duskmourn, if you're really into Bloomburrow, they have sleeves and deck boxes and playmats that have that art heavily featured on it. You can show off your vibe, or if you've built a specific commander deck, get the mat to match. You can do all of that while supporting the show and supporting your collection by going to ultrapro.com/command.
And of course, the final way to support all of our content is directly. If you go to patreon.com/command zone, you can get all kinds of cool perks like talking to us on our Discord. If you want to know what we think about the bans, you could ask us on our Discord. You probably would have heard a little bit earlier than this video.
You could watch this episode.
Yeah. And also, we do release Game Nights and Extra Turns to our patrons before the general public. It's also ad-free. And then we have exclusive content there as well. Again, patreon.com/command zone. And then one other perk is we call out one lucky patron every single episode.
This one is dedicated to Bridget Gordon. Bridget,
you rock.
You do.
Okay, let's get into it here. This is pretty major, and I would say the biggest banning or rules change, the biggest RCM announcement of our times.
I mean, I would think so. It's certainly the biggest one when Commander has been this big. Like, there's a lot of big changes in early Commander where they were figuring stuff out, but there's been no bans of this magnitude since a lot of people started playing Commander.
Yeah, I think it might be the biggest banning. Oh boy, we're right in the middle of it. So hyperbole is going to be, heavily featured probably on this episode. But right now, as it's happening to me, it feels like at least a candidate for sort of biggest banning in the history of Magic.
I mean, it's enormous.
Yeah.
I want to mention, if you haven't looked at it already, the Rules Committee released a lengthy document with all of their reasoning behind all of these bans. If you haven't read it, we'll read bits of it, but it's good for you to have the full chunk before going into this episode.
Yeah, we're going to link that in the show notes so it'll be easy to find that full article. It's not super duper long. It's not hard to read, so I would encourage you to check it out.
Yeah.
On that note, before we get into this, we're going to say our opinions about the bans and get into talking about like what we think about it. And I think it's going to be hard to do that without talking about the people making the decisions. But I want to make this statement right off the bat. And things have gotten pretty heated out there, and I think very inappropriately so in some cases, to like threats against the Rules Committee members. And I think that's like way, way too far here, people. So let's make sure that we are turning the dial down. It's okay to be displeased when decisions like this get made that affect you, but I can speak for the Rules Committee, people that we know, friends of ours, colleagues of ours, people we've known for years and years and years and worked with in various capacities, and we'll get into that as well. They want the best for the format. They made a decision that you don't like, but they're not bad people. They're not out to get anybody. They weren't trying to cause all this heartache. They're trying to do what they think is best.
Yeah. There's nothing nefarious going on here. This is a well-intended decision.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people get mad and then they look for things and they're saying that there's like secondary market manipulation, stuff like that. There's nothing of that kind going on here. These decisions are being made, and you're going to find out I don't agree with the decision, but at the same time, I am not putting it. I'm looking at the hearts of those people and being like they're evil in some way. These are good people. They're trying to do their best. Let's just dial down the rhetoric about them as people. Let's not be threatening people online, because you don't want to be that person out there. I know you don't want to. I get people get angry. Just don't let it get you worked up too much.
And you don't even know who on the Rules Committee voted which way. Like, they've kept that generally secret, but this time they released that like Olivia was a dissenting vote.
Yeah, usually I think their policy has been when they make a decision, they sort of close the door, they have their discussion. They're not always unanimous, but once they make a decision, they present a unified front. And this time they released the info that Olivia specifically had a different plan and was sort of pushing back specifically against Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt being banned, and wanted to sort of wait and see on those two and go ahead and ban Nadu and Dockside now, which her plan, I read it and I was like, yeah, why don't we do that? That sounds fine and good and reasonable. Knowing this is another reason to just like take a step back and like, it's okay again to voice displeasure, but do it at the institution of the Rules Committee and not necessarily the individual members.
There's channels to have these conversations. There's a Discord where you can get in the conversation with members of the Rules Committee and speak your piece. And that's way more productive for you than just yelling at somebody's random Instagram post. So chill out. Be nice.
Just think of what you're doing. Yeah. Nobody should be making threats against anybody for any reason. It's a game.
And for clarity's sake, Josh and I are not on the Rules Committee.
That's a good point.
We are members of the Commander Advisory Group. That means that we provide our opinion to the Rules Committee. We say what we think about certain cards, or most of the time very generally, what cards do you think should be banned? What cards are you concerned about? What cards do you think should be unbanned? They take that information that we give them, and all of the votes and all of the decisions get made within the Rules Committee, which is 5 people that do not include Josh and I.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I laugh because this tends to happen every time rules change happens. It's just happening more right now because this one's so big. People sort of get mad. I'm unsubscribing from your channel because they think our affiliation with the Rules Committee means that we were somehow involved in decisions like this. We don't make decisions like this. And usually, yes, we do know the outcome of what they've decided, like before the public. But on this one, we were even more on the outside than that.
Yeah, they really kept this one under their hat. We were told like a week in advance that some kind of big announcement was coming out on Monday. We were not given the details. And then we were like, what are the details? And
it's not like that we weren't given the details and nobody asked. Everybody was like, can you just tell us what they are?
What are the details?
And they were clearly like, we're not going to tell you.
Yeah. The Rules Committee told us that was like, we'll give you a couple hours in advance on the day. And after some conversation with the advisory group, they decided that they were going to tell us at a later or at an earlier date. So they ended up putting a post on our Discord on Saturday morning, We weren't tagged in it or anything like that, but
I totally didn't see it. I was out of town.
I was going to say, you were in Vegas.
I was having a reunion with some old high school buddies.
Yeah.
So I wasn't exactly checking Discord, and there was no tag, so nothing told me that, like, hey, there's a new thing you should look at happen. So I was just like, okay, well, I'm flying back. This trip was planned months ago. I'm going to fly back at around noon on Monday, and by then I will know what the heck has happened.
Right. Yeah. So we knew Monday was going to be a big deal. We didn't really know what was going to happen.
Did you see the post on Saturday?
I saw it like Saturday night and was like, oh, wow. So I had like Sunday to prepare for what was about to hit on Monday, because we had no idea what the gravity of this situation was going to be until I saw that post that evening. So I had a little bit of advance warning, more than everybody else, but like I said, we were not involved in this decision making
nobody
process
asked
at all.
It wasn't like, hey, we're going to tell you at this time on Saturday morning and get your opinion at that point. It wasn't. It was like, this decision's made. This is happening.
Yeah.
We're not looking for advisement here.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is what we've decided to do. And when I saw that, like, the week before they were going to make the post and they said that it was going to be big, they might have even said, like, there's bans involved. I don't remember the exact wording. My natural assumption was like, okay, it's going to be probably Nadu, I thought. And then, like, if there's any more, it'll be like Hullbreacher. It's kind of like Dockside. It'll be like one thing.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's been in the past. So there was no reason to believe it would be so cataclysmic.
For what it's worth, the Rules Committee has come out and said why they kept the CAG in the dark on this one. And they said it was largely because they knew there was giant financial ramifications for this decision. And they wanted to make sure as few people as possible knew going into it.
Right.
So there wasn't, like, to prevent as much, whatever insider trading could happen, I guess.
Yeah. So there's two things about that I hate.
Yeah.
One is it means you don't trust the CAG. And why do you have people on the CAG that you don't trust? I don't know. Maybe it's us that they don't trust. I don't know why. Like, we work with Wizards and have our own NDA with them and know about cards early, so we already have to know secrets. So maybe it's not us. Maybe it's other people. Whatever it is, first of all, I think most people on the CAG, off the top of my head, are trustworthy. I wouldn't, like, they've known about decisions before, but whatever, they made that decision. But the other thing is that's them admitting they knew the financial part of the whole thing. It's not like they didn't consider that. They considered it.
Yeah, I mean, they knew it was going to be big and kept us out of it.
Yeah, I guess that's the bottom line.
And that being said, all of the opinions that we say here just belong to us and have nothing, they have no weight against what the Rules Committee, what decisions they made. They'll take it into consideration, and that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's get into it here. And I think the question to just start off with that everyone's, tuned into the video for is just what do we think about the bans? And we should say, Rachel thinks what she thinks, and I think what I think. That we're not like some sort of unified front. We're not trying to necessarily convince each other, but we know that people want to hear what we think. And also, the types of things maybe we would have said to the Rules Committee if they'd asked us specifically about this, and in some cases, the things we did say in a general way in the past. So, Rachel, let's start with you.
Yeah. What
do you think of the bans?
This is a really complicated one, and I honestly think the answer sort of varies from card to card. I think the first thing, let's talk about Nadu first.
Sure.
I feel like Nadu's separate than the other three, which can all sort of fall under fast mana.
Okay.
For me, Nadu had a lot of momentum in the ban because it's been banned in numerous other formats. Wizards of the Coast released a thing that said, whoops, didn't mean to do this. And the Rules Committee responded in the same way and was like, you know what? Nadu's not good for other formats, and it's certainly not good for a format where it is in the command zone and you can recast it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I think that is the least controversial of the bans. I'm sorry for everybody who has a Nadu deck. There's lots out there. But
it's hard to imagine that even the people with Nadu decks would have been majorly surprised had just Nadu been banned. I think most people would have been like, yeah, that feels like it was coming just based on the momentum from outside from everything else that's happened.
Yeah.
So I can agree with that. I think Nadu, I did a poll online about this, just, hey, do you think the bans were good, bad, thumbs up, thumbs down? And it's crazy. It's exactly 50-50.
That's what it feels
Almost
like.
20,000 people responding. And this is just me making up numbers out of thin air, but I think if they'd only banned Nadu, it would be like 80%, maybe 90% in favor of Nadu. That's what it feels like the general consensus is out there about Nadu. So, okay, Nadu aside, what do you feel about the bans overall besides Nadu?
I think if we're living in a world where Commander is designed by the big game designer in the sky and there are no external ramifications other than gameplay, I like these bans. I think Commander is more fun without fast mana. I think it's more balanced more of the time. And generally, I think we agree with that. I play Mana Crypt and Dockside and Jeweled Lotus in one deck. We rarely play it on game nights. We know that it doesn't necessarily make for super entertaining gameplay, and my play group just doesn't really play them. So in general, I'm like, yes, I think this makes gameplay more interesting, more balanced. I like a slower format in Commander. So in a vacuum, yeah, I think Commander is better without these cards in it.
Okay, but we don't live in a vacuum.
No, we don't.
So outside the vacuum in the real world,
this is an enormous hit to the format. This is a huge change that overnight rips hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars out of the hands of players and game stores and vendors. And it came out of nowhere, and it came all at once. And I think it's really hard to weigh this decision without thinking about the financial and emotional ramifications of a decision this big, especially after 3 years of nothing. So that's the side that I really have to reckon with, is this has enormous consequences, and I don't know if the gameplay positives balance out the everything else feel bads.
So it sounds like you're in the exact middle of that 50-50.
I'm in the middle. It's horrible. Like, if I could wave a magic wand and have these cards disappear from everyone's binders and all of the money go back and everybody have an automatic perfect card swap in, then yes, I would wave that magic wand any day. But that isn't the world that we live in, and there's a lot of consequences to this ban, more than any other ban that certainly Commander has had. Yeah,
it's such a big ban because there's, first of all, very popular cards, but also very expensive cards. So there's a lot of layers to this. So there's two parts that you address there. One is gameplay ramifications, and the other is real world collectability, financial implications, and just disruption to the format as well.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about those two things.
Yeah, let's do it.
So gameplay wise, I think it's interesting, and I think a lot of the RC's decision making comes down to this weighing. And on the one side, you have the weight of the amount of fun that the format currently has.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you have the amount of fun, the weight of the amount of fun that it could have if things were different. And so let's say you weigh it right now and you say, it's 7 pounds of fun.
Yeah.
And then you imagine a world with no, forget Nadu, with no Dockside, Jeweled Lotus, and Mana Crypt. And you say, this is, the amount of fun in that world could weigh 8 pounds. And now you have to say, okay, so there's more fun over here. And then what's the cost of getting from here to there? Is it worth that extra pound of fun? And here's what I would say to that I think is faulty in the thinking, which is both weights are estimates. So you don't have a clear view, and there's no way to get one about the 7 pounds of now. You got to allow for a plus minus of a couple of pounds probably. So we could be at a 5, we could be at a 9. And then you don't know for sure the weight of the future other side where you lose those cards. Again, you have to allow for a plus minus. So over there, it could be, a 10 to a 6, let's say.
Yeah.
So you definitely have to acknowledge the fact that it's easy to make a decision here where you make it worse. I would agree with you, and I think the rules committee, in that in a vacuum, is the format probably at least a little more fun without those cards in it? I could see that argument. I think it's possible that is true and probable that it's true, but I don't think it's 100% that it's true.
Sure.
Because we know players that love these cards, and they're not cEDH players, so I know they exist out there. I don't know the percentage of the format they are, but for some people, Joe Johnson, Cassius, Posty, Kyle Hill, they play very powerful decks. And you talk about how you have one deck that has Mana Crypt and stuff in it. I have 27 decks. I have 2 decks that have a Mana Crypt in it. And those 2 decks are for playing with those guys.
Yes.
Because I know they exist, and I know they like that way. And I have one cEDH deck as well. I guess I have 3 decks with Mana Crypt in it. I forget about the cEDH deck. Anyway, but I have those specifically to play against them. And, people aren't monoliths. I don't like to play the same kind of Magic all the time. I like a cEDH game once in a while. I'm not good at it, but I like it. I like a high-powered game once in a while. And so it's possible, and I think at least you have to be open to the possibility that the fun right now weighs 7 pounds and the fun without those cards weighs 6.5 pounds. Because of the fun isn't lost from me or you because we already don't play those cards, but the fun is lost for the Cashises and Joe Johnsons and Kyle Hills of the world and the Posties.
We have no idea how big that population is.
We don't know the relative balance of those two things. So making this weight, this determination, and I think that's where the folly lies, is you can only make decisions where the split is a lot bigger, I think, where a lot better, like Hole Breacher.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm against bans, and I probably wouldn't have banned Hole Breacher, but it's very hard to make the argument that there was a whole lot of, because even the Cashises and the Posties of the world didn't really love, they didn't mind when Hole Breacher left. They weren't super mad about it. Actually, I think Cassius kind of was, but I didn't hear a lot of complaining.
All right, he's gotten our side.
Yeah, I didn't hear a lot of complaining from that contingent. So the gameplay part, I'm not willing to grant 100%, but I am willing to grant probably the format is more fun without them. Probably.
Sure. I think it's more of especially with cards like Jeweled Lotus and Dockside and certainly Nadu, I think the world's better if they don't exist. I think Jeweled Lotus and Nadu specifically are huge design mistakes. Dockside is also a design mistake. I'm
on record as asking them not to print Jeweled Lotus a year before it came out. Like, I got to see those cards early, and I've told this story before where I literally, that's the only time I've ever done this, but I sent an email that was like, please don't make this card. Like, I haven't liked Jeweled Lotus from the beginning. But we're not at the beginning.
Yeah, we're sort of a format of design mistakes. We have a lot of cards that are legal in our format that aren't legal in other formats. And I think we've gotten used to them, and those mistakes are something that we've sort of self-corrected for. The Rules Committee has always leaned on the pregame conversation to sort of filter the fast mana out of tables where it's inappropriate, where it's too fast and messes with the balance of things. And they've caught flack for that, honestly, for leaning too hard on the on the pregame conversation and saying that they don't make any bans because they're just like, expect everybody else to sort it out on their own. And now it seems like they've taken a step to take some pressure off of the pregame conversation. And now people are like, well, what about the pregame conversation?
Yeah, but that's a false equivalency because those are not the two same populations. And you're not going to get the opposite of flack for it. You're not going to get the people sending you messages being like, pregame conversations are awesome.
Are working.
Thanks for making decisions. You're only going to hear from people that are like, I don't like that we're relying on pregame conversations. We should have a ban list. So I don't think that is a piece of evidence that means anything.
Yeah, I just think that is how I think about this, right? And I think the biggest difference between 2 random pods at a game store is going to be speed. It's often fast mana. It can be win cons and combos and tutors and that kind of thing, but fast mana is a huge part of, can you interact with this deck or can you not? How fast can your deck win? And these cards were eliminated to push the turn number back, which does sort of balance the scales between a random deck that's closer to Joe's and a random deck that's closer to mine, right? Is like, Joe's deck is faster than my deck. And now they sort of live closer together on average at a game store. And I think, like, we come from a very specific population of people, right? We are our content creators, we're highly invested players, and we play with a lot of other highly invested, highly knowledgeable players. Most commander players are not like that. If they're going into a game store, they don't necessarily know how to communicate accurately. They don't understand that they should bring up Mana Crypt or Dockside because that's super normal. Everybody has a Mana Crypt or a Dockside, right? And by banning these, the Rules Committee is forcing the people who play them to reckon with it in the pregame conversation. And it's making the lines a little bit clearer about that conversation. Whether they went too far is definitely the question, but I do like the intention here is to take some pressure off of people who are not typically great at having social conversations with strangers and putting it on themselves and saying, we're going to draw a line in the sand. You can state clearly what side of the sand you're on. And now you have some tools to have this conversation with a stranger.
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to meaningfully change the necessity of the Rule Zero conversation. It's just going to move to different cards, in my view. It'll be Moxen and Ancient Tombs and, those kind of cards, Gaia's Cradles and stuff now.
Sure.
So I don't know that will meaningfully change anything about what has to occur. Like, I don't believe that Joe Johnson is not going to bring really powerful decks. He's just going to, there'll be a new card or a new set of cards that, are problematic. If I thought I didn't play against Joe or Cassius or Posty or Kyle or any of those people and think, oh boy, Mana Crypt's the issue with why they're powerful.
Sure, yeah.
Right? It's the combination of the whole deck, and you can take out 2 cards. They're gonna, whatever they slot in their place. I'm still gonna have to play a really powerful deck that's different than I play with everybody else against those people, which is fine. I'm not complaining about it. So I don't know that I agree that makes much of a difference there. I mean, the whole Rule Zero thing, there's reasons why I think it's more difficult to ask for something to be taken out than put in, or vice versa. I think at the very least, my only point is that, because I do generally agree, is that the certainty with which we speak about this shouldn't be as certain. It should be more probabilistic.
I agree.
So we don't know that for sure it's more fun in the format without them. It's not a clear cut enough. Nadu, I think we kind of can say that, because it is a miserable card. It was admitted as a mistake by basically everybody, down to the people who designed it. So there's nobody out there, saying, hey, no, Nadu's really, really fun. Even people who won tournaments were like, yeah, this card is miserable.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to track. It takes forever. It's way too powerful. Like, yeah, and I would like the decision to be closer to that than it is to something that is kind of feels like more like a closer roll of the dice.
Before we go on to the other one, I want to talk about the scale thing a little bit, because when we're guessing with scales, I think the solution the Rules Committee has had for a very long time is just putting very small amounts of weight on the scale at a time, right? Where it's like, we don't know what's going to happen, so we're going to put a little on and see what happens. And we're going to put a little on over here and we'll see what happens. And they've been slow, and they've made small changes, 1 card at a time. And this feels like we put a brick on a side. This feels like a brick is there, and now we're seeing what happens, and who knows? A lot.
Yeah.
A lot's going to happen, because a huge cause makes a huge effect, and we don't know what that effect is going to be.
Yeah. And I love that point, and I think it's exactly where I was going as well. And I think that as we're going to boil this down, I want to reiterate all the stuff I said about the type of people I think the Rules Committee are, and I have a ton of respect for them. I think they're very, very smart. And I think the part of this that was bungled is not the desire. They might be aiming at the right target, and there might be a way to pull off these bans, and I think there is, over the course of a longer period of time, that is palatable and doesn't cause this amount of uproar. And I think the huge mistake that was made, it's kind of outrageous, is just the sheer boldness of the amount all at once.
It's so aggressive.
I love boldness in leadership in general, but the problem is when you're small and you're scrappy, you want to be bold because you're trying to get bigger. You're trying to get more people into it, and you got to take big swings. But once you are already big, you're the main way to play the game. You want it to be stable because it affects so many people. You know, when there's only 5 people playing, you can make a big change because you can witness the change and know exactly what happened. When then someday there's 10 people playing, there's games going on you're not part of, but you can still keep touch with it because there's only 10 people. Then eventually there's 1,000 people playing, and it's right. There's a lot of Commander games happening where you're not there, but it's 1,000 people. You can get reports from most of the games that happened and hear about. Now there are tens of millions of people playing. Your vision of what's happening is so diminished that you have to just be careful. You drop a pebble, you wait for the ripple effects, and you kind of try and determine. And it's even at that point hard. But if you drop a freaking boulder, all you do is get everybody wet. And that's, I think, is really where this was just completely dumbfoundedly just bungled, which is, not a failure of gameplay evaluation and decision making, right? It's more of a failure of how it was announced, the time it was announced. Because let's imagine a world where they say, okay, Nadu and Dockside. Then a year later they say Jeweled Lotus, and then a year later they say Mana Crypt. I think in that world there's a little outrage, but not a lot. And also, I love your point about, hey, they hadn't done anything in 3 years.
Yeah. This is their opening bell.
Yeah. So in my scenario that I just laid out, Mana Crypt comes after consecutive bans and consecutive years. And I think in that case, everyone's like, they've been more active. This makes sense.
Right.
It doesn't feel... If somebody, I don't know, if somebody slaps you and you don't even see them and the hand just hits you, it's a totally different experience than if you're looking at somebody and they wind up and say, I'm going to slap you, and they swing.
Right.
Because you tense yourself, you get to lean away a little bit. It's not going to hurt as much, but this is a gut punch out of just nowhere. And I think the surprise factor of it is one of the big things that is causing a lot of this blowback and a lot of this, over-the-top frustration beyond what we normally see.
And I think it shakes one of the core tenets that the Rules Committee just put out in their philosophy document on their website. They said Commander is about 3 things, and one of them is Commander is stable. That is on the website. It says players who build Commander decks should be confident they will be able to play with them over long periods of time. Format management decisions are intended to, when necessary, make changes, even large ones, but not for the purpose of defining a metagame, shaking things up, or in a reaction to the hot topic of the day. And then it says minimize changes that require players to actively maintain their decks. And I wonder if this is like, we're going to make a big change all at once, so we're not constantly changing decks over the course of the next few years. But what it says today is that, like, I just opened my Rakdos Lord of Riots deck and it lit up. There's like 4 cards, 3, that are immediately red now. And I'm like, I have to find 3 new cards today to figure out what goes in that. The whole deck is different.
I mean, I don't know how to define this other than a shakeup, which is words they literally put in there. And, in some ways, a document like that is written and immediately is like a problem for you, the people that wrote it, because you're going to have to justify decisions through it. So I could give them a pass for like past wording, and sometimes they're going to have to go against it. But I mean, the part I think we should move on to next to talk about, because I think it's tied into the outrage, is the monetary value.
Yes. So
there was the gameplay part of the discussion, which I think we're both in general agreement. But as with most things, we're sitting slightly differently on the spectrum of how vehemently we feel about it.
Yeah.
But we're both in general on the side of like, hey, listen, as far as gameplay changes go, these are probably positive.
Yeah.
But from a value perspective, these are all very expensive cards and popular cards. So, I mean, 3 of the most expensive you could possibly hit in the format. There's only a couple. There's like Guy's Cradle and Chrome Mox?
And certainly not as many people play those.
Yeah.
Like if we're just looking at the number, like percentage of decks that they show up on EDH Rec, we're talking 10%.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out the total worldwide value of those 3 cards, trying to figure out exactly how many copies of all of them exist in the world. And then you go, there's different versions and everything, to try and average that out. It's a difficult thing to do. And then you sort of subtract from the numbers and do worst case scenarios, and you try and come up with a number. And I'd say what we came up with here in the office as sort of a ballpark figure conservatively is like maybe 100 million, maybe 150. Which is like a lot of money that just got vaporized at the stroke of a key. It feels like that. They obviously deliberated for a long time, but like they made a decision that got rid of a lot of money out of the pockets of, this isn't, if you go to Card Kingdom, they had like 20 or 25 listed. This isn't out of the pockets of just, it's not like there's somebody out there and they just have 10,000 Mana Crypts. I mean, these are out of the pockets of players that have in 3s and 4s, 2s and 3s.
Invested in their deck.
Cracked a pack. And we have a newer employee here, and she cracked in the new Mystery Booster product from the Festival in a Box and put it up on our Slack. Very excited that she had cracked a jeweled Lotus and Etched
This was
foil.
on Saturday, 2 days before the ban announcement happened.
Yeah, so just very excited. And there's a lot of people that just have 1 or 2 of these. They got the Commander Precon and have a Dockside and a whatever. And I know it's easy and it's very cavalier for people to talk about other people's money and say, big deal, you shouldn't invest in game pieces. There's a risk and they could be banned at any time. But like stability, like they mentioned in their document, is something that I think was okay up until maybe now, to trust a little bit. Like, hey, they might do some stuff, but it's not going to be drastic. It's not going to just destroy me. Maybe I lose Dockside, but I lose Dockside, and that's it, and that's palatable. And the amount all at once is what kind of pushes this into the top. I mean, speaking for myself, right? I have, we said, Mana Crypt in 3 decks. I have Dockside in 0 decks, and I have Jewel Lotus in 0 decks. So gameplay-wise, it barely affects me. But I own more Mana Crypts. I've been around for a while. You're not always the same player that you are too, and I learned over time, like, Mana Crypt's not as fun, and we're not going to play it as much, but, I got some Masterpiece Mana Crypts. I've got, Docksides, and I just woke up in the morning and listen, I don't really sell cards. And a lot of people say, well, I wasn't going to sell any, so it doesn't matter. But one thing I've said to my girlfriend is like, hey, listen, if anything happens to me, we've been together for 16 years. So if anything happens to me, you call Vinny, you sell all these Magic cards, and you'll have a nice nest egg, to do something with, And I can't help but think, like, that's not for me. That's for, like, a loved one of mine at some point that, like, hey, that's, like, maybe, like, $4,000 she just won't have.
Yeah.
Who knows what they were going to be worth at that point, That's real.
Yeah.
That sucks, And I think there's a lot of people feeling some form of that at different degrees, and we should be empathetic to that. Like, that's real. That's not... We see on Twitter, people post, like, hey, I had a car accident, or I had a medical emergency, and I'm trying to sell this stuff to help pay for it, sell these Magic cards. And, like, this is not theoretical thing that happens. We literally have seen this happen recently from, people in the community, and those are cards they're not going to be able to put on that list to help cover them in those situations. And I think, we should be empathetic about that. That is a thing that sucks.
We're also talking about, like there's tons of players that this affects. There's tons of vendors that this affects.
Yeah,
there's tons
LGSs.
of game stores that this affects. And they're not rolling in the bucks. They have this job because they like the game and want to be involved with the player base. And this has shaken the faith of businesses and players in investing in Magic cards, because cards like Mana Crypt are cards that you feel comfortable investing in. You don't expect Mana Crypt to disappear overnight.
It's been around for 25 plus years.
Since the Commander format started.
Yeah.
And overnight, the cards that they invested in, felt safe investing in, are no longer safe. And maybe that means Magic's no longer safe. Maybe that means I can't be a Magic vendor anymore, or I'm going to support it less at my store because it's too risky.
Yeah.
And there's huge financial consequences for these businesses, not big businesses, small businesses that are depending on the health and stability of Magic financially to survive.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that goes to LGSs and knows their local game store owner, 99 times out of 100, that game store owner is a small business owner that is just trying to get by. They're not driving Bentleys, right? They're like you and me. They worry about paying their mortgage, They got to pay for, all the back to school stuff for their kids, and they have bills and everything else, and they're just as worried about their finances as anybody else. And so that sucks. I mean, we know that one of the biggest foundational sort of things that ever happened in Magic was the scare around Chronicles when they reprinted a bunch of stuff, and it caused the player base at that time, a lot of people to leave, just because it was kind of like, it's not like you don't know that they can do stuff that makes the card value go down. It's just the fact that when they wave it so obviously in your face, it kind of makes you have to respond. And that was a moment when people were like, wait a minute, you can reprint all this stuff that I paid this money for and make it worth zero at any moment. And a lot of people left the game at that point. And people kind of laugh about it now like it wasn't a big deal. But I played then, and I knew people that were like, nope, selling my Magic cards, because at any moment they can print this stuff and it's gone. And they created the reserve list as like a response to it, to be like, sorry, don't leave, we won't do that anymore. And so this kind of stuff, I'd say that by means to just say this kind of thing does have negative impact in that way, to sort of back up what you said. And we have evidence that it does. It's not just like theory crafting, right? It is like, no, it happened before and it was bad. So like, yeah. And I think you said you'd talked to like a local game store owner who literally said that on the day the bannings are announced, they heard from people trying to sell out.
I have a friend who's a vendor, and he deals largely in like high-end cards or moving collections. Yeah. And he's like a TCG player vendor generally, and he does like conventions and that. And he had 6 people reach out on like today to sell out of their collections, to sell their big ticket cards, and be like, if
risk it.
If these are not worth the money I thought they were, then I can't look myself in the face and hang on to a $300 card that could be worth $100 tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a bad stock.
Yeah.
Hey Josh, what you brewing?
A health deck.
Don't you mean life gain?
Nope. I'm trying to eat healthier, but I'm a better deck brewer than I'm a meal planner, so health deck.
Well, you could start by cutting this Korean barbecue card.
What? No way. God, this is tough. It's hard to cut the things I like, but the healthy stuff is expensive. It just totally throws off my curve.
Well, if you want some easy and inexpensive tech, check out ORGAIN. I've been loving their new 30-gram protein shakes as a way to get more nutrition. They help me manage my hunger and maintain a more healthy lifestyle. Even if you're not a bodybuilder, protein is still key to a healthy diet. And ORGAIN shakes actually taste really good without a ton of sugar or artificial sweeteners.
Whoa, that is good. Nice. Easy upgrade.
Wait, this isn't food, this is Ristic Study. Why is this in here?
For card draw? Duh.
ORGAIN 30-gram protein shakes are available at Costco and ORGAIN.com. If you want to get in on the delicious protein-packed nutrition today, head to ORGAIN.com/command and use code COMMAND for 20% off your order. Once again, that's ORGAIN.com/command for 20% off. And make sure you use our promo code COMMAND so they know we sent you.
Dark Lord of Insects, I call you! Altanak! 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 Sorry, dude, you've got to stop calling me. You know how expensive my freaking phone plan is?
Master, you should really switch to Mint Mobile. Right now, all of their 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan.
Oh, that sounds hard.
No, Master, it's easy. You can even keep your old number, your phone, and all your contacts. Why, it's easier than getting 3 copies of a card into the graveyard to cheat on your mana cost.
Well, you can just pay my full cost.
No! I'd rather pay only $15 for high-speed data on the nation's largest 5G network. Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile!
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/command. That's mintmobile.com/command. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/command. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Yes! I win! Probably. Anyway.
Probably. What's going on?
I just goldfished a huge turn on ARCHIDEKT. Check it out. They've got the best playtester in the business. Playing and tapping your cards is as simple as clicking them. Everything goes right where you want it, but you can drag things by hand and group them together in different ways too. Then there's easy shortcut keys for things like making copies, sending cards between zones, and starting the next turn.
Nice, so this is a Traxa. All that proliferating's gotta take a while.
It doesn't actually. Just right click and hit proliferate all counters.
Oh wow. Yeah, you probably do win.
I think so.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/command zone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/command zone. And I know there are people out there that say, well, they should all be game bases and they should all be a quarter. And I think it's just naive. Like, the reality is that Magic has lasted so long because the value of the card is important. It's one of the things that's in the cultural zeitgeist. You know, if I hand a pack to like my nephew or something that doesn't play, or my girlfriend or whatever, and they open it up, the first thing that they always ask is they hand you the cards and they go, is anything worth anything?
Right.
Because they know that Magic cards are sometimes worth stuff and they want to know, did I get anything cool? And just having that mystique is good for the game of Magic. And also the fact that collectors can collect it when they don't care about the game keep pieces. It's good business strategy in that it protects you. It's an insurance policy against when game design kind of doesn't work, when it misses. Because you can miss a set, you can have bad limited environment, bad standard environment, or whatever, and still sell cards. Whereas if you're only 100% reliant on how good the game is, you have a miss set, your sales go down, maybe you go out of business, maybe you don't make it through. And I think that's one of the key ingredients that has made Magic last as long as it has. They are now in a position where they get to put key reprints into sets to make sure they sell them so the game's never in danger. And that's another part of this process, which we sort of alluded to, which is like, man, recently they have reprinted these cards that just got banned, which I think can dovetail into the next point of the discussion, which is I think there's always at moments like these, this outcry because Wizards is separate from the rules committee.
Sure.
To say, well, hey, Wizards probably wouldn't have made these moves. We can tell because why would you print a card literally that's currently in a product that's now banned? You know, Festival in the Box has Dual
in
Lotus.
hands.
Yeah,
when
as
the
like
ban
the
happened.
headline thing. Wizards wouldn't have done that.
Part of how this announcement went is it did have 2 things at the end that suggested future projects that they're working on. One of them is a collaboration with Wizards on sculpting the pregame conversation. That is exactly how I want Wizards involved in the rules committee. I want them working closely together so they have communication about products and hopefully can avoid problems like this in the future. I don't know if that's how it works. Wizards has a lot of people on it, and nobody, like the people who are talking to the rules committee, aren't necessarily controlling the product rollout.
Right.
But I love that they're starting to work together to use Wizards' communication palette and the rules committee's focus on gameplay to better communicate with more Commander players. Because the rules committee's biggest problem has always been that they only reach the most invested players.
Yeah.
Like they only reach the ones who are paying attention. And that's not everybody. Most people are just playing Commander like with their kids at their kitchen table and they don't know the rules committee exists.
Right.
They think we're the rules committee.
Well, enough people think that no one's getting the right message. And a
Nobody's
lot of people
getting the
do
right
think
message.
Wizards controls it. Yeah, when
Right.
you run into somebody who's fairly new, and you mention a rules committee or whatever, at some point they go, "Wait, what?
Yeah.
I thought Wizard just by default." And you're like, "No."
There's a real lack of communication of how this big, crazy format that we have is run and is operated. And I love those two working together and collaborating to sort of get the best of both worlds. Something that we've talked about a few times is interesting is like we've talked about sort of extending this rollout process and making it a little bit easier to palette. But some of the responses from the community is that this card's been legal forever. You're not allowed to ban it now, or you're not allowed to ban Jeweled Lotus because it's only available in Commander.
Right.
There's a sense that like certain cards are untouchable.
Yeah.
And I wonder how we think the rules committee can better communicate with the player base so they feel a little less blindsided, or if it's possible to warn people ahead of time to make this feel better.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people want like a watch list, so them to release like an official like list of the problematic cards that they're talking about. There's been people that are like, want more transparency about like what it is they're even thinking about. If they start talking about hybrid mana or whatever, they want to just hear about those conversations occurring. And I don't know the solution to this, but I know that I believe they tried a watch list in the past, and it was a problem because people just assumed those cards are 100% going away. But there was cards on the watch list that, they seem crazy now. Dead-Eye Navigator would have been on the watch list. Consecrated Sphinx would have been on the watch list for, a decade.
Yeah.
And so what do? Nobody buys those cards. They don't reprint those cards. But those cards clearly everyone would laugh at if you banned them now and didn't need to be banned. But they were close enough that, to be transparent, they would need to tell you about it. So I'm not sure that the way to go is a watch list because I think it'll just create...
Also, where's the line for the watch list, right?
Yeah.
There's some cards that one or two people will talk about and you're like, what? No, don't put that on a watch list. People will freak out.
But we did bring it up in the meeting.
But we did.
So, yeah, we have to tell everybody. Yeah, I think that's a really tough thing to do. To me, we've already touched on what is the way to go. And going back to your, like, are any cards unbannable? Or are any cards, completely unbannable? Like you would, and Mana Crypt would have been the closest one to it, right? I guess Sol Ring is the one, but we can get to that in a second. But Mana Crypt... had been around so long that it just felt like, hey, if they were going to ban it, they've had a million chances. And what's changed? What made Mana Crypt so much worse in the last 2 years than it was before that? And I think the way that you make a Mana Crypt ban palatable is you work up to it by just having a little bit of increased activity and a little bit of like signals to like, we're doing more.
You ban Dockside, it's a little bit palatable fast mana. You ban Jeweled Lotus, then it's like, okay, we're looking at fast mana, and then suddenly Mana Crypt's on the table.
Yeah, and I think in that scenario that we laid out, you have people that are upset, but less so. Yeah.
They saw it coming.
A little bit. And it makes more sense.
At least you know the hands in the room.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's a person in here slapping people.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
I might get slapped.
I will just brace myself a little bit more in general.
All right, let's talk about it. Sol Ring.
Okay. Man, our segues have been really good.
We've been nailing this. So there's a whole segment in the ban announcement that specifically addresses Sol Ring. It basically says, we're not banning Sol Ring. We have no desire to. Yes, based on the criteria we talked about here, it would be banned. Sol Ring is the iconic card of the format, and it's sufficiently tied to the identity of the format that it defies the laws of physics in a way that no other card does. Sol Ring's untouchable. You can invest in Sol Ring. Don't do that. They printed so much.
Yeah. Well, I have 400 if that's counted as investing. I got so many. Yeah.
Stonks.
How do you feel about this position of like, okay, this card is, by our criteria should be banned, but we're not banning it?
I think it just adds to people's confusion and frustration. If they ban Sol Ring, that it feels like it's as big of a Band-Aid, honestly. At
this point, they should have just banned 12 things at once because it wouldn't be that much worse.
Yeah, now everybody's messed up. Sol Ring is part of the format. I think banning Sol Ring would be a mistake and would be a step too far.
Yeah.
But if you're banning fast mana and you think fast mana is bad for the format, leaving a piece of fast mana in addition to many other pieces of fast mana that are still in the format, it muddles the message. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the message doesn't need to be clear.
Yeah, I think there was always going to be a card, like, Mox Diamond,
Dark Ritual,
Ancient Tomb, Guy's Cradle, there's never going to be a clean line where you go, okay, we boxed that off and there's nothing similar that's even close to this line, and everyone will just see that those ones are totally different than these other ones, and there was nothing close. That's not possible.
No.
So I would say that, Grim Monolith and stuff exists, right? Like, so Mana Vault, a lot of people were talking about as well. Obviously have differences because you got to get them untapped and whatever, but still, whatever you put the line, it's going to be close to one of these things. So I'm okay with that argument. I think it's fine, and I've argued in the same way before, where it's like it's okay to have, the thing where somebody gets off to a fast start happen sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's less okay or less fun. And again, this is in my estimation of how I like to play, and I acknowledge that there are people out there. Cassius, Posty, Joe, Kyle they're my poster guys. They're my Backstreet Boys for this.
The Backstreet Boys of high-powered casual.
They would make a really good group.
They would.
I mean, they have Post Malone in it, so...
Okay, you're the singer. Everybody else dance.
I bet Cassius would be a good dancer.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, have you seen that spin
He's
kick
got
he does?
moves.
He's got moves, yeah. Okay, sorry. Anyway. So but I do believe that, like, you don't want a ton of those games where people are just getting out to, like, hey, I have 6-man available, 2-man turn 2. That, and I think it's not like, hey, we never want that to happen. It's just like we want that to happen less. And under those... under that criteria, it's fine to keep one. And, we kind of follow this in our own thing. We don't ban Sol Rings from our gameplay videos.
Nope.
We allow it because it's okay once in a while. It's just not okay all the time. And we have mulligan rules that say, like, if you mulligan you can mulligan as many times as you want, but if you mulligan even once, no Sol Ring can be in there.
Yep.
We don't have to say Mana Crypt because we don't allow Mana Crypt in those games.
We don't play with Mana Crypt.
Or Jeweled Lotus, yeah. So, to me, that's a fine argument, but I do get people being confused by it. But I also think there's a large contingent out there that, if they're being fair, are not confused by it. They're just looking for issues
To poke holes in it, sure.
to poke, because they're mad about the bans, and I get that. But
And also, their argument is sort of backwards, right? Where if it's like, well, why not Sol Ring?
yeah,
That is an argument for the banning of Sol Ring, not the argument for the unbanning of Mana Crypt.
Yeah.
So you're sort of advocating against yourself in that way.
but they're trying to say, like, look, the whole decision-making process should be called into question because it is not consistent and it doesn't make sense. But I think their argument is fine and makes perfect sense as far as, like, hey, we just want this to happen less, and we know we can't stop all of it.
Right.
That's okay.
I think it's worth mentioning that, like, in this high power meta where everybody plays all the fast mana in all of their decks, it sort of negates the existence of fast mana altogether, right? Because everybody's getting out to fast starts, so the games are even.
Interesting.
They mull it, like, if you raise...
the less you have of it, the more it creates an up and down.
Right.
You get a fast start, but nobody else does, and so you just topple over everybody, yeah.
Right. So I would say if everybody has Mana Crypts, Mana Crypt obviously doesn't do the imbalanced thing that the rules committee is considering, right?
Right.
What they're picturing is a stranger game where one person has Mana Crypt, nobody else does, and they get out to a super fast start. They don't have the same redundancy of fast mana in their decks. So, like, fast mana becomes less of a problem when all the mana's fast.
Yeah, although in my experience, there wasn't a tipping point where we got enough of it that it still didn't cause this, this problem of, like, somebody gets off a lot faster than everybody else. Even playing in those high-powered games with those, the people that like that, you still often have these games where one person gets off to a faster start than the other three. You don't often get the, like, oh, everybody got a Mana Crypt.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, that's not, like, that common. So, yeah. So in theory, I think that could be true, but I don't think we ever really got there.
Yeah, I just think it's a very difference in perception about fast mana, right? Where, like, some people perceive fast mana as this thing that is unfair advantage to the people who have this, and then the people that play all with fast mana is like, yeah, everybody has fast mana. It's nothing.
Well, that is an interesting perspective, and good segue once again to the other community that's affected by this that we are not part of. So we're just going to say the caveat that, like, we don't play cEDH, and so I don't think we're super qualified to talk about the intricacies here. But it is definitely hitting that community, these bands, differently than the casual community. In that, like, hyperbolically, but mostly true, all of the decks run Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt.
Yeah.
And every red deck runs Dockside. And
Nadu is a hugely popular commander.
Yep, and one of the most powerful instantly when it came out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and I'll take their word at it based on the chatter I've seen on Twitter, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, are saying that, like, Dockside single-handedly makes red viable. And a lot of people saying, like, they don't think that red is like a real viable color. So then it
yeah.
so it really maybe limits format diversity in cEDH, just being like, hey, you can't really have a red deck, which I don't know if that's true or not, and maybe that's
can't really have a green deck.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, so we got 3 colors now that we can play, and it's mostly blue decks, let's be honest.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing, and I think opens up a whole nother, cracks open more another rift that's already sort of was bubbling, which I think is the part that we can talk about here.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, there was already a surge of support for a cEDH ban list, a TEDH ban list. So this would tournament EDH, which is for cEDH, and it just had some specific unbans that would have served cEDH, and a couple of bans that would have served cEDH specifically. So already there was a resurgence in this. It was not successful. It is basically kaput at this point. But with these bans and cEDH feeling this huge impact, it's very likely, I think, that there's going to be another resurgence in popularity for a cEDH only ban list.
Yeah, that section of the community has definitely already been feeling marginalized, like they weren't, included in discussions or even considered during decision-making processes, and, talking about like, hey, should we form our own leadership? And so the fact that, they tried to get off the ground and didn't really take off, but that kind of indicates that there's that sort of ground swell. There's, I can agree with you that there's a good chance there's going to be a resurgence of that. And so the question, and, that's up to cEDH, and I think their community, and they have every right to, try and figure out whatever governance that they can. There's upsides and downsides to that route, obviously, but we're casual players, and it's not for us to tell them what they should be doing. The question is, like, do we think that's a good route for Commander overall? Do we think that's good for casual? Do we think it's bad? Like, what do we think of the fact that, like, let's say they go through and they find a leadership group and they all coalesce around their own tournament. Don't call it the RC also. Call it the Tournament Council or something so we have a different acronym. Do you think that's good or bad?
For the average Commander player, I think it's more confusing. Is honestly, like, already cEDH is sort of not really understood among most casual Commander players. And I think that it having both, there's going to be the most powerful decks in casual Commander using our ban list.
Right.
There's always going to be that. There's going to be people that are interested in finding the ceiling in a casual format.
It's going to be what other deck, Kyle Hill or Cactus or Opposed to Your Plan. Yep.
That's going to exist.
Yeah.
So there's going to be this sort of cEDH segment of Commander always. And then whether there's a group that sort of splinters off and uses their own ban list or not, that's going to exist. So honestly, I don't think it changes much for casual Commander players, other than there's people that play at a high power level and they're doing their own thing.
Yeah, I think I'm skeptical that it will be great for the cEDH community, just in that right now they draw from the big Commander casuals, and they have a lot of people they can convert from there, and people that sort of like, start as new players and work their way and find they like cEDH and then move into that community. And when you sort of have a splinter and you're a different format now because your rules are different, and it'll start really close, but now you have your own ruling body. And as years go on and bans changes, they might even make rules changes, and it won't take long before it's pretty far apart. And it feels, we had dual Commander for a while, and that never really took off, and that's got a totally own rule.
I played dual Commander for a while. Yeah. There's a 1v1 Commander ban list that exists on MTGO. Yeah. There's a dual Commander ban list that exists. There's also Archon, which is a separate ban list, but is also dual Commander.
I think that's part of the problem with this is, like, they have to all coalesce around one thing, because if they splinter off into 4 or 5 things, there's no chance that works. Yeah. So, I mean, that's their hurdles to overcome and everything, but I think ultimately, if they decide that's the best for them, I wish them the best of luck, and I hope it works out, because that's a pretty big segment of people, and they want to enjoy the way the game the way they want to enjoy it, and they should be allowed to do it. And if they don't think Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus make their format better, what other recourse do they have?
Yeah, I think it would be frustrating to be a cEDH player that plays in a very specific meta that has one ruling body that isn't considering them at all, and that is frustrating, and that would be enough for me to be like, we need to find somebody who is considering the consequences for our community. And that's enough for me. But there are major ramifications to that. And is it even possible is the big thing. I think if they can get their own ban list, that's good for them. And it's going to be better for gameplay overall. But if is the big step here.
Yeah. I always thought they could layer another tournament rule just on top of the commander rules. And these bans might throw that out the window. But I always thought it'd be cool to have like a picks and ban system on the fly per game where like at the beginning of the game, you just pass your entire deck to the person on the left and they can take out one card from it. And then they pass it to the left, they take out one card. Then they pass to the left, take out one card.
That's sweet.
And then you play with whatever it is. So you start with 103 cards or whatever. But hey,
Sure.
you don't like Thassa's Oracle?
Gone.
It's gone. You don't like Mana Crypt? Gone. Yeah. And that would scale with whatever Wizards can design, whatever the most popular busted thing is. And it would be harder to build combo and things like that. Anyway, but if that's making colors not viable based on this change, they won't be able to layer that on top of the current commander ban list anymore. Yeah. Okay. I think this is probably as far as we should go.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a lot to talk about, and it's entirely possible that we make another video about this. Obviously, Jimmy wasn't here. You know, obviously, we were, like we said, we were blindsided by this, and we weren't able to like schedule our production. You know, I was like literally, I was out of town, and I'm like, I'm flying in. Let's record this. You know, once I got delayed and everything.
And
we're like,
Okay.
And I'm on Twitter, like reading everything. So there's entirely possible there's more content about this, but for now, we're gonna leave it there. I want to reiterate, please. Again, it's okay to let the rules committee know that you don't agree with the decision so you can hopefully influence them, you know, when they're making decisions later on down the road. But let's not, no personal attacks, no threats of any kind. Like that stuff has been happening and that's like totally out of bounds. You're messed up if you're making threats against people for changing rules in a game. Like,
You need to take a break.
You need to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that kind of person.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, before we go, there's a couple of things in the article that are just getting no press because of the bans, obviously.
So we're going to be quick, but we're going to say them. First of all, they mentioned a silver bordered project, which came up in the last announcement. They just said it was happening. It doesn't seem like enough progress has been made for them to release it in this announcement. And honestly, I'm glad because what a lot of chaos that would have introduced. Basically, they said, we talked in the last update about providing players with better ways to communicate about silver bordered cards in their deck. That project is going well, but they're not ready for release. They do expect it to be in the next announcement, which is on November 18th.
Okay. And then there is the pregame conversations project that you also talked about already that they're working with Wizards to talk about, you know, facilitating folks having that pregame conversation we already alluded to. Okay. To the listeners, how are you taking this announcement? What do you think? Are these bans good or bad for Commander? By the time you're watching this, it's been a few days. Have you been able to take a deep breath, count to 10? Do you see it differently maybe than you saw it immediately after it happened? I'm wondering if that's going to happen to me. I hope a little bit because we're pretty amped up about it right now.
It's been a wild day, and a lot of people are trying to get their notes in order. And you're like, yeah, but what about this? And you're like, I don't know, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the fact that there was no unbans announced with it.
God, I wish there was an unban.
Talk about like coming up with a strategy where we roll this out over. You know, multiple years.
But here's this.
Yeah, I think a couple of unbans in here would have helped take the edge off a little bit. That's another way to kind of, hey, we're going to take this away. But yeah, here's a little treat. It's just, it's too bad. I think that the rollout was a little bit bungled. Okay.
All right. If you want to pick up any treats, go to cardkingdom.com.
There you go. You can give yourself a treat.
Oh, get yourself a treat at cardkingdom.com/command. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of singles, of sealed product, however you like to pick up Magic cards. You've got a couple of open slots in your deck. Probably, if you're like me, I'm going to need to pick up a couple of cards for my decks. And I like shopping in a place that has a huge selection so I can get all of them in one place. I've got one package to track through the mail. And then when they arrive, I have one day of updating all of my decks. I trust them to ship the cards that I ordered online in the condition, in the printing that I wanted, because Card Kingdom knows cards and knows shipping. So
they're professionals.
They are pros.
When you get the package from Card Kingdom, it is you're like, nothing was going to happen to this. This is great. They know what they're doing.
Cardkingdom.com/command.
And of course, once you get those cards, you want to protect them. The game accessories brand that we trust our own collections to here at the Command Zone is ULTRAPRO. If you go to ultrapro.com/command, you can find all kinds of cool products, including stuff adorned with all the Duskmourn art. Or if you liked Thunder Junction or something like that, they've still got stuff like that. Or if you just like guild symbols or mana symbols, hey, let me show you the Mana 8 product here. If you're watching on video, you can see quality. It is very stylish, very classy. This is stuff we've been using at the office. We really, really like it. I love Mana 8 because if I walk into a game store or an event, it just pops off the table. I can see somebody from 50 feet away. I'm like, that battlefield looks awesome.
Plus, there's nothing like a matching set, you know, having the playmat and the deck box and the sleeves. You're like,
you get all dressed up. Yeah, you're looking fancy. It's
What's
good.
the occasion?
If you want to look cool, if you want your battlefield to look awesome, if you want your cards to be protected, ultrapro.com/command.
Before we go, we're going to say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Eric Lem, Rachel Kender, Gaurav Galati, Jamie Block, Jordan Pridgeon, Jake Boss, Josh Murphy, Manson Lung, Karina Cruz, Sebastian Salazar, Evan Limburger, Sam Waldo, and yours truly, Jimmy Wong.
Yeah, big thanks to our team. When news like this drops out of the sky, everybody's got to drop everything and scramble to get these videos out extra quick. So thanks to our team.
There was a comment that we put out like the bat signal and be like, assemble.
Yeah, kind of is like that.
It feels like it's the game night symbol in the sky.
All right, before we go, I just want to say, Commander's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. I know it feels bad right now. We're going to be good. We're going to be playing in a few months, and we'll be grumbling still, I think, about this one a little bit, but everything will be okay. We'll still be having fun.
Have fun. Bye. Thanks for watching.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.